Hello, Tarot friends, and welcome to this flip-through review of the Sola Busca Tarot. The edition that I'm reviewing today is the Lo Scarabeo release. And there are several editions out there. Some, I believe Il Meneghello has an edition, and some of the other smaller deck creators that specialize in historic reprints. But those are going to set you back a little bit on your budget. So this Sola Busca edition from Lo Scarabeo is a mass market edition. I think I even got it on sale, so it was really quite budget friendly. It is printed using, modern printing methods, and it's on this, kind of glossy cardstock. So the cards themselves are not as historically accurate as some of the Sola Busca decks that are made by these smaller, more historically accurate deck creators. But to just get into the package, you get this complete pack from Lo Scarabeo, and the box holds, there's a room there where the box holds the cards, and it also has a pretty decent sized guidebook. And the commentary, the historic commentary, is written by Professor Andrea Vitali. I've read some of his work online. Some of it's only in Italian, and you have to really struggle to get an English translation. However, he's a great scholar. I really appreciate his work. And being a Lo Scarabeo release, it comes in several different languages. There are also commentaries that are for card meanings in this guidebook. However, I find them pretty useless, especially for this deck, because this deck is such an anomaly in the tarot world. This Sola Busca deck is completely mysterious, unique, and unlike any other deck. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Anastasia Tarot and Vedic Astrology, where we sail the cosmic currents, searching for the treasures of divine wisdom, one tarot card at a time. Now let's get into the review. So to give a little historic background on the Sola Busca Tarot, it was created in 1491. Again, there's controversy around that, but this is what historians have kind of agreed on. And this deck is unique because in the 1490s, pretty much every other tarot deck was hand-painted. All these decks were made for the noble families of northern Italy, Milan, Venice, Firenze. So all of the decks were commissioned by noble families, but they were usually hand-painted, like the Visconti Sforza and all those similar decks. They were all hand-painted. Only Sola Busca was etched. It was not painted, it was etched. And you can see, even though this has been colorized, the etching was really fine work. It had nothing to do with the more primitive woodcut tarot cards that would come out later, like the Rosenwald Tarot, and then getting into most of the Tarot de Marseille. All of those were woodcut, and they didn't have the level of detail that we see in this Sola Busca, which was etched into copper plates. So this deck is already incredibly unique. It's the only deck we know that was etched. And also, it is the only deck from the 1400s that has come to us complete and intact with all 78 cards. And this is because this deck was virtually unknown for 500 years. It was commissioned by the Sola Busca family in the late 1400s, and it was etched and later colorized, but it remained the sole property of this family for 500 years. So no one outside of the family, and maybe some historians and scholars, ever even saw this deck. This deck only became known to the public in 1907 when photographs of it were donated to the British Museum by the Busca Tarot family. And the woman who made this donation was the Marchioness, and she was born the Duchess Serbelloni of Milan, and she married into the Busca family, thus making it the Busca Serbelloni family. She donated pictures of this deck to the British Museum in 1907, and this is likely where Pamela Coleman Smith was able to see these images. And that brings us to the other unique thing about the Sola Busca deck, is this was the only deck from the 1400s and 1500s that had illustrated pips. None of the other decks of that time had illustrated pips. And we'll get into that with the flip through, where you can see some of the specific Sola Busca cards that influenced the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So the only other thing I'm going to say about this deck before we get into the flip through is, if you are really into studying the Game of Saturn, Decoding the Sola Busca Tarot by Peter Mark Adams, to me, for everything I've read on Sola Busca deck, Peter Mark Adams really hits the nail on the head. Again, this is a very controversial deck, and even this book is controversial. Not everyone agrees with Peter Mark Adams' take on history and on this deck. However, I really recommend this book. Now, it is a huge, weighty tome. It weighs a lot. It takes up a lot of room on the bookshelf. However, it's quite expensive, especially if you're in the USA. I believe this deck is cheaper if you live in England or in Europe. I believe it's cheaper. But for me, the material that's included in this book, it was absolutely worth the hefty price tag and the amount of space it takes up on my bookshelf. So I really recommend this Game of Saturn by Peter Mark Adams if you have the ability to invest or even the interest in really getting to the bottom of this incredibly mysterious and iconic deck. Okay, so let's get into the flip through. And I may have mentioned already, the 22 major arcana or triumphi of this deck bear no resemblance to the 22 major arcana that most of us are familiar with from other Tarot de Marseille and Tarot decks. So they're completely different. Yes, there are 22 of them, but they are completely different. So this is the Fool, and he has a bagpipe and a crow. I just love this Fool card. So one of the other things that is notable in these major arcana are that each card is labeled with the name of either a mythological or a historic figure. And this likely gives some clue as to their meanings, which is one reason I pretty much ignore the card meanings given in the guidebook. This deck, to me, it just doesn't function like any other deck. And you may notice this deck definitely uses homoerotic imagery. That was one of the things that Peter Mark Adams gets into. And as I have mentioned, this is an incredibly dark deck. I literally can't read with it. It creeps me out too much. So here's my favorite. It looks like the fellow is throwing a baby into the fire for card number 8. Now, supposedly, this card references sex magic rather than actual child sacrifice. However, I do find this deck to be, for me, too dark to work with. I do have friends that read with this deck though, and they don't have the same reaction to it that I do. They get great readings from it, so to each their own. And we can see this is trump number 17, but it does somewhat evoke the Hermit card with the, there's an old man and there's a staff. Although in this case, his staff would seem to have some kind of spirit or something living in it, and he appears to be communing with it. And in trump number 20, we see imagery that relates to the biblical myth of Samson and Delilah. This illustration evokes when Samson broke the pillar and destroyed the temple of the Philistines. And this pillar imagery is usually seen in the Strength card in some of these old Tarot decks and Tarot de Marseille that show a pillar. It is referencing that Samson myth, but it is usually in card number 8, La Forza, or Strength. And now we're getting into the minors. These are the spade, or swords, and they're all red, as if blood-drenched. And we can see here from this 3 of Swords, this is very evocative of Rider-Waite-Smith 3 of Swords, and Pamela Coleman Smith was obviously quite influenced by that card. And here we have the 7 of Swords, and there is some similarity with the Pamela Coleman Smith's depiction of 7 of Swords for Rider-Waite-Smith. Now, this is interesting that the 10 of Swords in Sola Busca really is evocative of the 10 of Wands in Rider-Waite-Smith. So this isn't a direct correlation with the card, but I do really feel a similarity between the Sola Busca 10 of Swords and the Rider-Waite-Smith 10 of Wands. Page of Swords, Knight of Swords, Queen, and King. Now we're getting into the bastoni, or wands, batons. So this deck is just very dark and creepy as far as I'm concerned. Page of Wands, Knight. And we can see that the court cards in this deck do follow the same format of other court cards in other decks. However, for example, the Queen of Wands is associated with Pallas Athena. So the court cards also name the characters with names from either history or mythology. And again, this probably meant something to the people who were actually reading and using this deck. At the time, it has been lost to us, although Peter Mark Adams does some great research as to rebuilding what it may have meant. And now we're getting into the denarii or coins. And this Four of Coins is the only female figure in the pips. Otherwise, there are absolutely no female figures in the pips. And this one has the skull. Very dark deck. So I believe this is the Eight of Coins. And in Page of Coins, we see it appears to be a falcon. Knight. She references, this Queen of Coins references a figure from, I believe it is Greek mythology. And final suit here, we're getting into the cups. Now, all these cups are quite odd. They're more like water vessels than cups proper, or wine vessels, perhaps. And here we have this sort of mer creature, or half man, half dragon creature in the Nine of Cups. Now, Ten of Cups is quite an interesting card in this deck. Peter Mark Adams believes that the person depicted here is Plethon, Gemistos Plethon, who supposedly is the Byzantine scholar who smuggled the works of Plato and the Hermetica of Hermes Trismegistos. He brought these manuscripts from Byzantium to Italy at the Council of Ferrara, and supposedly, he passed these manuscripts to Cosimo de' Medici, who went on to found the Neoplatonic Institute of Ferrara, or Firenze. In any case, Plethon, if this is in fact Plethon in this Ten of Cups card, this is an amazing piece of living history that is encoded in this Sola Busca deck. This is a very mysterious and historic deck. Page of Cups, Knight of Cups. Now this Knight of Cups has wings, and we can see that this also influenced Pamela Coleman Smith, who gives the Knight of Cups in Rider-Waite Smith. The Knight of Cups has wings on his feet. So we can see a little relationship in those cards. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Sola Busca Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. May you enjoy the blessings of peace, prosperity, health, and wisdom, whatever deck you're using.